When we think about English language learners, we often do so from a deficit perspective, viewing them as incompetent or limited because their speaking or writing may be difficult to understand or display non-native like features or grammar forms. However, theories of second language learning provide us with alternative ways to view and understand multilingual students' evolving language proficiencies. It's important to understand that learning another language, specifically the acquisition of grammar forms, is a lengthy and complex process that necessarily involves the production of language forms that will differ significantly from native speaker norms. Linguists refer to these forms that learners produce as interlanguage. Interlanguage is a term coined by a linguist by the name of Larry Selinker in the early 70s to describe a system of linguistic production that language learners will produce. And this system of linguistic production differs from the language learner's first language and the target language that they're learning. In other words, it's a hybrid system of language. So as instructors, when our students produce language forms that differ from native speaker norms, we shouldn't view this as a deficit, but rather as a normal and necessary process of learning another language. The implication for instructors is that we ought not to expect our students to produce native-like forms like those of their native speaker peers. In addition to understanding the kinds of language that multilingual students may produce, it's equally important to understand the length of time that it can take to acquire another language. Linguists have long distinguished between two kinds of language acquisition: the acquisition of basic interpersonal communication skills, or BICS for short, and the acquisition of cognitive language academic proficiency, or CALP for short. The research suggests that BICS can be acquired in approximately 1 to 2 years, whereas CALP can take up to 7 to 9 years to fully develop. So a multilingual student may have a fully developed BICS, but still be in the early developing stages of CALP. Conversely, another multilingual student, perhaps one who is new to the United States, may have a limited BICS, or basic communication skills, and a more developed CALP. The implication here is that as instructors, we shouldn't make hasty assumptions about our students' language proficiencies too early, and that we need to have realistic expectations about the degree of academic language proficiency that a student will be able to develop over the course of a single semester. Understanding theories of second language learning, like those I've just described, can help instructors move away from a deficit orientation toward multilingual students to one of communicative responsibility. The linguist Rosina Lippi-Green speaks about a concept she calls the communicative burden. She argues that in any social situation, speakers must decide whether they are going to take responsibility for their part in the act of communication. Generally speaking, native speakers are willing to share this burden with other native speakers. However, Rosina Lippi-Green points out that when interacting with non-native speakers, native speakers will often reject their share of the communicative burden because communication is either too difficult or even impossible. As instructors, we need to learn to own our share of the communicative burden. What this means practically is when we encounter a student's piece of writing that may be full of errors or non-native-like features, or be difficult to understand or comprehend at first glance, we shouldn't write it off. And we should try to read that paper on its own terms, and we should become more tolerant of linguistic variation. Now, what this does not mean is that we shouldn't provide our students with explicit instruction or feedback to help them improve their linguistic accuracy and communicative abilities. We absolutely should, and that is a topic that we'll take up in the 4th module, assessment, assignments, and feedback for multilingual learners.